I'm Debbie Hopper. I am one of the mortgage originators here at the bank, so I met most of you whenever you came in, so thank you so much for coming. Something we wanted to talk about was what to expect during the application process. So, Sean kind of went over pre-approvals, you're beginning early and everything. What to expect whenever you're going to come in, sit down with myself, Shelly, a couple of the other originators here at the bank. So, there's a couple of different ways you can apply.
Go ahead, I'm trying to fix it.
So there's a couple of different ways you can apply. In person, over the phone, or online at our website. The preference is to do it in person because we would like to sit down, meet with you, explain the whole process to you so that you're totally comfortable. But in the essence of time, if it's one of those things where you say, hey, I'd like to just do this over the phone, I'll send you my documents later, that's perfectly fine too. You want to allow about an hour or so if we sit down to discuss it. If we do it over the phone, maybe like 20 minutes or so. So the key is we're really flexible to you guys. If you want to do it online, that's fine too. But again, to get the most value out of it, I would say, the best thing is to meet in person. Also, if your financial picture is a little bit more complex, maybe you have private businesses, self-employed, anything like that, allow a little bit of extra time for that. So could go over an hour if we meet in person. So what to expect at the actual meeting? One of the first things we do is pull your credit report. We're going to get 3 credit scores when we do that. And then we will sit down and review it with you. So certain loan programs have minimum credit scores. So that's one of the first things that we're going to want to look at is what's your credit score, what program is it going to qualify for. It's also recommended to start cleaning up your credit if you have something bad on there. Not everybody does, but if you have a medical bill, a credit card that was just a little bit late or something like that, start cleaning that up 6 to 12 months in advance so that whenever we meet, you've had that positive credit for a little bit of time, that'll start bringing your score back up. So that is one thing that we will do is actually sit down and review your credit report with you so you know exactly what is on there. So next thing is just a couple key points of the actual mortgage application. There's a picture of what it looks like. You may not ever see that until you sign your disclosures, which we'll talk about at a later time, but just so, I'm sorry, I'm not blocking your view. Just so you can kind of see what it looks like there. The first thing we're going to talk about is the type of program. So whether it's FHA, VA, conventional, things like that, we're going to have that conversation about what fits you best. And actually, Shelly, the other engineer here, is going to go over products later, so I don't want to get into that too much. But one of the things we're going to do first is talk about what's the best product for you. The amount, the term, so number of months, all of that, we're going to have a nice conversation about payment and what works for you. So then the property information. Do you have a house yet? Have you found a house? Are we doing this as a pre-approval? If we're doing it as a pre-approval, you won't have an address yet, and that's fine. That's the whole purpose, is you're out looking for a house, of course. But if you have an address, we would gather that information next. The next area is borrower information. Yeah, there it is. This is all of your information. So your name, your social security number, date of birth, dependents, things like that. This is to verify who you are, your identity. So that when we're pulling your credit report, for example, is it matching everything that you're telling us on the application? We want to go back at least 2 years on your address. So if you rent, if you own, things like that, be prepared to bring that information for a full 2 years. You'll see that's kind of a consistency with the mortgage application is to go 2 years back. It's kind of a rule of thumb. So next area is the employment information. There it is. Another area we're wanting, go back further. Another area that we are looking for 2 years worth of history in order to verify your income and employment. So how long you've worked there, what your position is. Gosh, can we turn that thing off?
Keep going.
Okay. What your position is there, how long you work there, your years in profession. So we want to see that you have a nice, stable work history in a perfect world. Don't, get too worried if, if you think that's not the case. We'll talk it out with you and see if that's an issue or not. But ideally, we want to see a couple years on the job and that you've been in that profession for a while, So next area is going to be your monthly income and housing expense. You're not really filling this in. It's kind of calculating for you, or for us, based on what your originator is entering. So is your income salary, or is it hourly? So you want to come to specify that with us. Be prepared to tell us exactly how your pay is calculated. If you're hourly, are you 40 hours a week, or is it 30 hours? Just kind of, come prepared with that information. The next area there is overtime bonuses and commissions. Bring the information, tell us, and then we will actually make that determination based on your income, verification of income and employment, as to if we can use that or not, because believe it or not, sometimes we can't. If your bonus is not consistent, maybe you only got it for 1 year, things like that, for example. So you bring us the information, we will check it out with your employer to determine if we can use that, because by all means you want typically to have that extra income, except for certain programs. This will also calculate any rental income. Most likely you're not going to have that if you are a first-time home buyer, because that would mean you already own your home, or own a home. But if you would have some sort of rental income, it would also calculate in this area. So any other additional income, so side jobs, Social Security income, military income, pensions, things like that. Also bring that information, be prepared to talk about that, because we want to give you credit for that. And we'll go over the checklist actually later today that will tell you what documentation we need for each of these items, but that's essentially where it would all be listed there. So next is assets and liabilities on the application. So your assets. These are actually liquid assets. So cash in the bank. What do we have to use towards your closing? Don't worry so much about, cars, antiques in your house, things like that. Well, those are great assets to have. We're concerned with your actual liquid assets. What can you pull out for this deal? So the more cash assets you provide, the stronger the application is. So you may not even be planning to use it for your down payment or for your closing costs, but the fact that you're listing it makes you look strong. There's also reserves that are required for some loan programs. You don't have to use them, but you have to show that you have these reserves sitting there. You have to prove it to the investor, essentially. So you won't touch these assets, but we still want to list them, of course. We will also talk about other ways to get money for your down payment via our grant programs later on. So we'll kind of dive into that more in depth later. Retirement accounts. Do you have any 401ks with your work, anything like that? Again, maybe you don't plan to take it out, but it's going to build strength to your application listing any retirement accounts. So your liabilities are actually pulled from your credit report. You don't have to necessarily, come prepared to tell us all about them. While any information you provide is great and just additional information, it's going to pull from your credit report and actually generate it to your application here. So it'll show, balance, payments, things like that for your, credit cards, loans. Sometimes cell phone bills show on there. But again, we're going to pull that all in. You don't have to worry too much about that. Any open lines, any open trades, we call them. last section is there's a real estate owned section. Again, if you would own some properties, we would want information about it. You most likely wouldn't be a first-time home buyer, but just wanted to kind of put that out there so you know what to expect. We're going to want things like market value, taxes and insurance, things like that on any properties that you may own. So at the very end of the application, there's a series of questions called declarations. This is where we're just going to ask you, do you have any outstanding, it's over there on the right, any outstanding judgments, bankruptcies, foreclosures, or any lawsuits, things like that. You may be asked to elaborate on some of those. If you would check yes to, have you had a foreclosure in the last 7 years? When we check yes, we kind of have to put a little bit more information in there. Each program has different look-back periods, if you will. So that's one reason that we will ask for information like that, just so we can gather that up front. Is the down payment borrowed? Are you a citizen? Things like that. If you pay or receive any alimony or child support, we're going to ask that question as well. And I think that's about the end of that area there. That's just where you would sign at the very end. So we've sat down, we've done the whole application, whether we did it in person or on the phone. What happens next? After we've done the application, we send it into what's called loan processing. So this is where loan processor will go through all the documents you've provided to myself or Shelley and see if we're missing anything. A lot of times we think we get everything and we don't. So they will find what we may have missed, or we'll see something on there that requires additional information, and then we'll come back to you and say, hey, can you give us a little bit more on this? If it's a pre-approval, our goal is to get that pre-approval letter out to you in 24 to 48 hours at the longest. If you are self-employed, something like that, that might be a little bit more complicated. It could take a little bit longer. But typically, we'll get that out to you very quickly. Even if you would say on a morning, hey, I need this by today, we work with you. We try to get that out as fast as we can for you. If it's a live loan, processing is going to take about 72 hours, so about 3 days for the processor to go through it, see again if we missed anything, and what we need to get off of you. Preliminary disclosures. So within 3 days of a live loan, we have to send you out what is called preliminary disclosures. It's going to have things like a loan estimate in it that will have all of your costs, your final number, but it's not so final because it's just an estimate. But we would have also gone over this at the initial meeting. We would have already gone over costs and everything. So when you see this loan estimate, it should really be just a reinforcement of what you and I have already talked about, because I've already given you those numbers, I've already given you those payments and things like that. But the loan estimate is one of those things that actually must be disclosed to you within 3 days of the application. So hard copies of the documents, they'll be sent to you via regular mail. At that time, we can kind of decide, and we'll have a conversation about it. Do we want to meet and sign these documents, or if you're busy or our schedules can't connect or something, you're more than welcome to sign them and just drop them in the mail back. Again, we're working with whatever is easiest for you. Most important part is that we do get them back quickly, though. So the disclosures allow the whole loan packet to, move quickly. So it's very important for us to get that off of you so that we can keep everything moving. We can do things like order tax transcripts, things like that. Just we ask that you get them back in a timely manner. So also a welcome letter is in your packet. The welcome letter is just stating, thank you so much for choosing Mars Bank, and here's what we forgot to get from you as a loan originator. Do we need additional bank statements? Or maybe we missed a page on a bank statement. And again, we'll go over the checklist of what you guys need to provide later on, but the welcome letter would state, what we may have missed in gathering from you. And if we have 0 to 1 things on there, that's like a perfect welcome letter. So while all this is happening, the loan processors are simultaneously ordering the appraisal in the background. This is assuming you have a live loan, not a pre-approval. Nothing you have to worry about. We're taking care of all of it for you. They're just kind of quietly moving it along in the background. It'll get scheduled very quickly to keep the loan moving. All right, so it's gone through processing. We have everything we need. The processor determines we have enough now to send this whole packet into the underwriters. So the underwriter's job is to make sure the file meets the requirements of the specific loan program you have applied for. One of the first things they're going to do is calculate your debt to income ratio. And we have a little example up there for you. It's the total of your loan payments. And we say loan payments because it's credit cards, school loans, car loans, things like that. Not so much utilities, cell phone bills, things like that. So what we've pulled off of your credit report as a direct liability against you. So plus your new mortgage payment, and plus your taxes and insurance for your new place. Which also actually brings up a good point. Whenever we meet, I always ask people, what are you kind of seeing are the taxes? If it's a pre-approval, what are you kind of seeing are the taxes for this house that you're looking at? Even just a ballpark. Are you seeing $2,000 taxes or $5,000 taxes? Because that can make a huge impact all around, whether your payment or your debt to income ratio. All of that divided by your gross income. We want to make sure it's not net income. So, I've had people say to me, here's what my check was that got deposited into the bank. And while that's great to have, that's your net. So we want to get your gross so that your debt to income is lower, actually. Your pay stub would show that. Again, on the checklist we'll talk about later, but your pay stub would show what your gross income is, hopefully. So to briefly touch on something called title insurance that you may have heard before. So title insurance is crucial for a home buyer because it protects you and the lender from the possibility that your seller doesn't, or maybe previous sellers didn't, have free and clear ownership of the house and property, and therefore cannot rightfully transfer full ownership to you. So again, it's very important. It's ordered by your lender before closing. Nothing you have to do. Once the title work is completed and the loan conditions are cleared, we may be able to schedule closing. This is referred to as a clear to close. You'll hear that a lot within the process. The agents are asking, do we have the clear to close? We're asking our processors, do we have the clear to close? That just means we have everything and we're ready to get it scheduled. So it's like music to our ears to hear clear to close. So the actual mortgage closing process. We're going to schedule the closing on the date that you've agreed to on your sales agreement. So this is the date you've already picked out when you signed it. The buyers, the sellers, the real estate agent has made their suggestion on a closing date. We typically have already told you at this point in the beginning, we want 45 to 60 days for a sales agreement. And that's something else we will talk to the real estate agents about, is that's just a good number. It's not too short, it's not too long. We'll still try to get it moving as quickly as possible, but we at least ask for 45 days whenever you are signing for that closing date. So when you're coordinating the closing, it's going to be coordinated between buyers, sellers, the lender, and the closing company for a date, time, and location that works for everyone. Whether that be one of our Mars National Bank offices, oftentimes it's at the closing company's office, or at the real estate agent's office. So you have all these moving parts for the scheduling of the closing, but they're real good about it. As far as scheduling a time and a place that works for everybody. Something else that also happens is we must provide to you something called a closing disclosure 3 days before closing at a minimum. Knock on wood, we often have ours out before 3 days, very often actually. Mary Ann, our processing managers here, they get those out in 10 days before often. So what the closing disclosure means to you is these are your final numbers. It's going to have your final payment on it. Your cash you need to bring to closing. We will review that all with you. Okay, so you don't have to be blind to it. We're walking you through this closing disclosure. It replaced what was called the HUD, if you've heard the HUD. The HUD statement went away about a year and a half or 2 years ago, and now there's something called the closing disclosure that we'll go over with you. So the actual meeting itself, called the closing meeting, takes about an hour. I was at one last week, I think that took like 18 minutes. So it can be as fast or as slow as the buyers, sellers, everybody kind of guides it. But typically for purchase mortgage, block aside an hour of your time. You're going to have a lot to sign. A pretty thick packet. So the closing is actually conducted by a representative from the closing company. Your loan officer will typically be there, but the person who's having you sign things like deed, mortgage, the note, things like that is actually a representative from the closing company, so an attorney or just somebody they have hired. And then we are there typically just for you, for questions, moral support. So you're going to want to bring a check. So a certified check, not a personal check. We can't stress this enough. It does have to be guaranteed funds. So cashier's check, they have a couple different names. Cashier's check, treasurer's check, certified check, I think. It's not a personal check. Or you would have wired the money in advance. Some closing companies do ask you to wire it, and that's fine too. You may wire it the day before or the morning of. So however they tell us that they would like their money. Also, when you come, please make sure you bring a driver's license. Closing company wants to make sure it's you signing all these papers. And a personal checkbook. So for any small incidentals, if there is something very last minute that comes up, maybe a $30 item, a water bill or something like that, bring your checkbook just in case. It doesn't have to happen often, but can never be too prepared. So you had your closing, and congratulations, you've bought a house. Everybody's happy now at the closing.